In a world where supernatural creatures of the night exist, our main character and friendly neighborhood werewolf, Yuli Jirov, stands as one of the last of his kind, and in order to make a living, kills vampires alongside his pseudo-family, the Jaegers. One fateful night in Shanghai, Kershner, a royal vampire, speaks before a crowd of seemingly normal people, explaining how their kin have been put into grave danger. Amongst the crowd, the ladies press against these men and stare at them with such admiration. Around the same time, Yuli wields his briefcase on his shoulder and walks until he meets up with Professor Willard, the leader of the Jaegers. He stops his timepiece and asks if Yuli is ready to leave. Before the werewolf can answer, Dorothea, who had driven the professor, tells the young'un to make their next gig a loud one. Yuli just smiles as he suggests that they stay mellow. Back to Kershner's speech, he tells his people to have a wonderful night, and they simultaneously drop their glasses to the ground. Their faces suddenly turn pale and fangs emanate as they pierce into the necks of their unknowing guests. The lights go off, signaling the beginning of a bloodfest. Meanwhile, Philip, the youngest and most creative Jaeger, is busy serenading some passers-by with his violin when Fallon, a Jaeger of Irish descent, throws two people out of a nearby door. He then yells at the youngster, telling him that the time has come. Agatha, a royal vampire, is quick to warn Kershner about the Jaegers coming to town, and the vampire agrees to leave soon enough. All 5 Jaegers gather on the roof opposite the vampire hideout, but Yuli becomes impatient after smelling blood. He runs off and uses the first vampire he sees to break his fall as he shatters the window of their hideout. The other vampires transform, but he peels out his 2-edged spear before they can attack him and begins slicing through them with a proper smile on his face. He's only 17, by the way. Soon enough, Dorothea, Fallon and Philip begin to rain bullets on the vampires as they back up their stubborn teammate. Afterwards, Professor announces that Kershner is nowhere to be found, and Philip gives Yuli an earful for going off alone. They all board a ship out of Shanghai where the professor warns Yuli about the dangers of his behavior. Around the same time, some cops find a bunch of mangled corpses in Japan. The Jaegers arrive in Tokyo and stand out like a sore thumb on an obese lady. It's also Yuli's first time in the country. The group gets picked up soon enough. Major Hideyomi Iba is off duty, but still gets updated about an escapee named Kurakate. Apparently, he's the one who mangled the corpses the cops had found that morning, contrary to the initial theory that it was done by the Hayako party. The Major shuns Mochizuki for his conclusion and they both walk away. The Jaegers arrive at the Baron's estate at the same time that Miss Naoi, Ryuko, finishes her sparring session. She gets distracted when she sees the new guests through the window. Well, Yuli mostly catches her eye. Later on, the professor meets with the Baron to discuss the recent restless nights that have been plaguing Japan. Around the same time, Yuli abandons his mates who are being led to their sleeping quarters, all because he smelled flowers. At the garden, Miss Ryuko spies on him until she gathers the courage to stand face to face with the werewolf. They introduce themselves after staring at each other, and she talks about flowers on end. Unfortunately, Yuli informs her that they're rotting from their roots and walks away. Back to the Baron, he fills Professor Willard in on the Hayako party and how they're an anti-government, wealth-seeking organization. He also brings up the death row escapee, Haru Kateguichiru. Meanwhile, the kiddies play in their new suite and discuss why Kershner would travel to Japan in the first place. Dorothea is sure that V-Shipping, their mother agency, did not give them wrong information, so Fallon suggests that it's for food. Only Yuli disagrees with this and speaks soberly about vampires living entirely different lives from theirs. Philip pulls his chair close to Yuli's just to piss him off. It works when he calls him a pup, but Fallon is quick enough to grab both boys and smother them with love. Professor walks in on the warm scene and tells the team to get some rest in preparation for the next day. Major Arba of the 9th floor annex reports to his boss, and they discuss working behind the scenes. The Major is ready for the grunt work and smiles as he tells this to his superior. Meanwhile, the not-so-innocent Hurricane lies beaten up and in chains as Agatha pays him a visit. He laments about being broken out of jail, and the vampire laughs because she has other plans for him. At the precinct, the inspector is yelling the heads off of his subordinates for not catching Hurricane. He's interrupted with a message about visitors from V-Shipping, and this man mellows as he comes before Professor and Dorothea. He smiles and hands their books to the prof, just as Home Affairs had instructed it. That night, a patrol officer witnesses a brutal killing and, unfortunately, gets taken out by a vampire too. At the same time, Professor realizes that Hurricane targeted only males before his incarceration, but has been targeting all genders since his escape. He finds this weird and is still talking about it when an officer bursts in to announce a murder in Arasaka. Professor then quietly tells Dorothea to gather the gang. As the cops race down to the crime scene, so do the Jaegers. They discuss how impossible it is for Kurakate to break out without any help. Philip tells them of reports about flying humans that have been concluded to be drunken testimonies. With this, Professor deduces that Karakte may not even be alive. He thinks the reason they haven't found him is because he's not the killer. Agatha looks around suspiciously before taking a turn into a nearby alley. She pauses when she sees Yuli, but continues walking because she doesn't know him. Immediately she crosses him, he tells her that he can smell the blood on her flesh. She lets out her fangs and attacks the werewolf using her metal claws. Fortunately, Yuli is fast enough to block using his spear. Agatha makes a run for it, cutting down a wooden scaffold to block his path. She runs into some cops and spills their blood easily. Dorothea then turns her into a gymnast as she shoots multiple bullets that make the vampire somersault. Agatha soon notices that she's surrounded, but her men interfere and get her out in a car. While the others chase after her, Yuli makes his way to a building top and then jumps on top of their vehicle, yelling at Fallon to get him close enough. Agatha's driver nudges Fallon off the road, but not before Yuli jumps onto their vehicle. The driver tries shooting him off their roof and fails. Yuli then stabs him with his spear and gets off the car before it explodes. Agatha comes out of the flames with a smile and manages to corner the werewolf. She soon discovers what he is when his blue eyes glow. This gives Yuli time to escape, grab his spear and cut off one of her hands. She tries jumping to safety, but he quickly cuts off a leg too, sending her falling into the ocean, or so he thought. Agatha suddenly begins to float and Yuli realizes that she's a royal. The others arrive at this moment and Professor yells at him to stay closer to them. The werewolf doesn't listen and jumps off the bridge in an attempt to end Agatha's life. Unfortunately, a sniper named Mikael shoots him down mid-air, sending him falling into the sea. Yuli wakes up 2 days later to a young girl named Saki screaming for her father to come see. Hanada Kisuke had found the werewolf and was kind enough to revive him. It turns out that he's a doctor and his daughter is quite curious. Their discussion gets interrupted when a maid comes in to announce the arrival of some guests. By guests, I mean the Jaegers. Saki keeps peeking at the others suspiciously as Professor has a private conversation with Yuli. The old man scolds him once again for running off foolishly. Yuli blames his werewolf blood, claiming that it kept pushing him to make a move. Professor is quick to shun him for abandoning his proverbial pack and threatens to cut him loose should such a thing repeat itself. Yuli solemnly agrees and gets told that Hanada agreed to let him stay until he's completely healed. He tries to fight Professor on this, but his body betrays him. He's left with no choice but to stay, and Professor leaves Philip behind just in case. That night, the cops try to stop a swordsman named Momo's Naotora, but soon discover that he brought his colleagues from the Hayako party. Around the same time, Yuli suddenly opens his eyes in bed and sits up. He notices his environment, including a Philip that's still heavily asleep on the floor. Saki comes to his door with her bear in hand and complaints on her lips, leaving the werewolf to conclude that she couldn't sleep. He asks about her dad, and it turns out that he's working. As for her mother, the little girl quips that she's in heaven. This hits the spot for Yuli and he offers to read her a book. She then thanks him for being a big brother to her, and of course, it's weird for the lone wolf. He escorts her to her room and picks out a book as they discuss what her dad does for a living. He ends up rooting for Hanada to succeed in whatever project is holding him up. Back at the police precinct, some officers discuss the Hayako party breaking into the residence of a biologist named Abe Yoshio and murdering him. They mention Momos Naotora, but Major Iba interrupts, only to call the Hayako party a group of terrorists. He thinks they must be backed by some foreign intelligence agency, and his colleagues suggest V-shipping. Pictures of Professor and the Jaegers are spilled all over the table, and Major Iba announces that they can't let them go about like they run things in Japan. Talking about the devil, Professor arrives at a bar and requests for a mockingbird with lemon. The waiter, Jiro, almost turns him away until he realizes that it's code language. Both men then talk about Alma Trading Company, who happen to be V-Shipping's competitors in their official line of work. It turns out that Alma Trading has been running weapons through Japan, but Professor dismisses Kershner's crew having anything to do with it. The next day, Yuli walks about all healed and an excited Saki calls out to him while Philip watches with contempt and sneaks comments on his healing abilities. The nosy maid attributes Yuli's healing to Dr. Hanada and gives Philip the breakdown of how he was a heart doctor, but his wife had died from a heart condition. Apparently, the doctor has been working on a new heart device all by himself. Meanwhile, Yuli and Saki bond over losing their mothers, and the werewolf confesses that his mother always tells him he can do it. Back at the Naoi household, Ryuko is sparring when her mind drifts off to when she barged in on a meeting her dad was having with Professor, all so she could ask about Yuli's well-being. She had been shot down by her father, and by the time her mind returned to the present, she had already lost her sparring session. She challenges her sensei to another round on the condition that he tells her where Yuli is staying if she wins. The man just smiles and admits that he's lost from the beginning. On the flip side, Fallon bounces his theory about the Hayako party off of Dorothea, and Professor quips that the words they write in blood translate to punishment. Although there's no obvious correlation in punishing a biologist, he can't shake off the feeling that the Hayako party is involved with vampires. Worse off, he feels that Kershner will make a move soon. In yet another hideout, Kershner expresses his disappointment in Agatha for getting beaten up by a mere beast. His words, not mine. Meanwhile, Philip tries to alert Dr. Hanada that it's dinner time, but he's too engrossed in his work to answer. Papers lie on the floor outside the lab and inside. Hanada keeps talking to his contraption. Dorothea tracks down some foreign newspapers and stops her guide from entering the room with her. Fallon is on covert duties as Philip fills him in on what he saw in the doctor's lab, and in turn, Fallon tells Professor about the artificial heart. The next day, Yuli can't stop telling Saki about tomatoes, and this pisses Philip off. Saki then approaches the Killjoy and asks him if he hates Yuli. A stunned Philip tries explaining that Yuli's friend did something bad to his parents, but the little girl simply asks if Yuli hurt Philip directly. She then requests that Philip becomes friends with Yuli, confusing the violinist even more. Luckily, Saki's attention span is as long as that of a goldfish, so she becomes more interested in hearing him play the violin. Hanada comes running outside before Philip can even touch his strings. The doctor keeps yelling his daughter's name, telling her that he's finally done with work. She jumps and embraces him as he promises to do everything for her from that moment forward. The maid quietly excuses herself and takes the news to Agatha, who now has a double blade where her foot used to be. She had pretended like she wanted to pay the maid, and then killed her off as she bent to pick up the bills. Ryuko begins her search for Yuli's temporary address, while Dorothea fills the professor in on everything she found. He then concludes that he was right. Apparently the Hayako party has been killing off researchers who have made strides in either blood work or organ replacement. A call from Fallon interrupts this eureka session. He informs Professor that the getaway car the vampires used the other day belonged to Dr. Hanada, but he had reported it stolen after his assistant left. The connection becomes obvious, so Professor and Dorothea get in their car in a bid to rush out. Unfortunately, Major Iba stops their vehicle pretending to be a journalist in search of answers. Back at the doctor's residence, Saki is worried that their maid is taking too long to shop. Philip offers to cook dinner, but then the lights go off. Soon enough, multiple vampires raid the house, leaving both Jaegers to fight them off. Agatha makes a guest appearance and picks off Dr. Hanada just to sink her teeth into him. She then takes the fight with Yuli outside. She expresses her surprise about a surviving Sirius chasing them down, and Yuli's disgust towards her kind can't hide itself. He promises to chase down every vampire until he kills the last one, and with this, their fight continues. An oblivious Ryuko finally arrives at the doctor's home and is bothered that Yuli may not want to see her so late at night. Meanwhile, Agatha almost cuts off the werewolf's head with her foot as Philip makes a run for it with little Saki in his arms. They get chased down by Dr. Hanada, who's now a vampire. He whips Philip on the neck and sends him flying in the distance, leaving Saki vulnerable. Yuli bursts into the same garden the little girl is in, but Dr. Hanada grabs her before him and Philip. The violinist is too weak to attack, while Agatha ensures that the werewolf doesn't get any breathing space. She corners him to a tree and manages to break off one of his blades. While it's still in the air, Yuli slashes Agatha's stomach with the other side, adjusts the blade, and stabs her with it. The cool part is that he makes it in time to kick his broken blade straight into Dr. Hanada's throat. Philip rushes to the little girl's side as she watches her father fall to the ground. Meanwhile, Agatha throws herself a pity party for being killed by a Sirius, and turns into dust soon enough. Saki claws at her father's dust as an explosion goes off in the lab. Yuli doesn't waste time following it, though. He gets to the rooftop and sees the culprits escaping on a boat. Unfortunately, he gets attacked before he can follow them. He soon discovers that his attacker is in fact his brother, Mikael. The cops show up to investigate the scene, and as they do so, Professor and Dorothea drive off with Philip and Yuli. The next day, Major Iba gets an update about the incident and tells his subordinate not to be hasty in concluding that V shipping is to blame for it. All because there are other suspicious companies who could have easily done it. In school, while her teacher is searching for X, Ryuko is wondering what it was that she saw Yuli fighting against. Maki and Shino interrupt her thought process during lunch, claiming that she's lovesick, and Ryuko can't even deny it. Meanwhile, Philip walks in on Yuli cleaning his weapon and informs him about Saki living with her relatives. Things get kind of weird, so Philip rushes out of the room. The werewolf takes a trip down memory lane, remembering how he messed up a hunt by sneezing and his elder brother, Mikael, got the deer instead. They walked home together and presented the kill to the village. To mark such a huge kill, they planned to have a feast at Elder Gustav's house, and Sachi, Yuli's mother, came to join them at that point. He then rushed to hug her. Mikael had lied that Yuli killed the deer, so the unsolicited praise freaked out the youngin. So much so that he confessed. They all gathered to eat and drink, and afterwards it was just Elder Gustav and Yuli's family left at the table. Gustav went on about their village lacking purpose since they no longer had to guard the Ark of Sirius, and Mikael pulls off a pretty good impression of Gustav. Yuli had pretended to be asleep but woke up upon hearing the Ark of Sirius. Everyone convinced him that it's far away, and the youngster promised to protect it alongside his mother, brother, and everyone in the village. He sneezed and then got a hug from his mother. That's when Yuli returns to the present, still bearing the Ark of Sirius in mind. Dorothea meets him staring out the window and checks up on him. Fallon comes next, but the lone wolf refuses to go get a bite with him. Professor notices Fallon leave and checks in on Yuli himself. They get talking about how the werewolf had his entire family killed by vampires and worse off. How him getting to the Ark won't mean anything anymore. You see, when Yuli was younger, he had suddenly woken up to screams. His brother called him and he had gone running down the stairs. Unfortunately, he met bloody corpses and his half-dead mother. That was the first time he ever saw a vampire. Sachi struggled to wrap a shawl around Yuli's neck, and her last words were for him to live. He and Mikael then braced up and made it out together. Meanwhile, vampires continued to raid Dogville, killing off everyone and burning the entire village to a crisp. The vampires had gone in search of the Ark back then, and since the Ark called Yuli to Japan, he thinks it's also what his brother is here for. Mikael had escorted Yuli down a trail of snow, advising him not to use guns because they dull his sense of smell. He finally advised his little brother to live and rushed headfirst into a swarm of vampires. As they cut him down, Yuli tried to approach the scene. Fortunately, Mikael was able to knock him down the cliff, leaving the youngster to slide into the snowy depths. Yuli tells Professor of how different his brother now looks and that he only recognized him by a scar and his tone of voice. Professor thinks Mikael must have made a blood pact with a vampire, and this makes the werewolf feel like crap. He wonders why he felt so happy to see his brother right after he just inflicted pain on poor Saki. He wonders if he can kill his brother the way he killed Dr. Hanada without hesitation, a brother who was turned only because he wanted to protect him. Yuli weeps as he asks Professor what he's supposed to do, but the Englishman has no idea how to console him. As Professor leaves the room, Ryuko watches until her crush comes out and heads out to the gardens in a solemn mood. He remembers the first time he accessed his werewolf powers. It was against the vampire who tore his mother's shawl to shreds. At that point, Ryuko walks up to him against his will. He even grabs her roughly, but the girl isn't scared. The werewolf then calms down and apologizes before wimping out from a sudden gust of cold wind. Ryuko later brings up the vampire incident she witnessed, and Yuli uses it as a yardstick to get away from her. Meanwhile, Professor is busy shutting down his liver at Jiro's bar as he remembers the day he met Yuli. The youngster had refused to drink any of the water he offered him, and when threatened with death, he claimed that it would give him a chance to join his mother and brother. Professor finally broke him by saying it's not what his mother or brother would want. Yuli then burst into tears and asked him how he was supposed to live. One of Kershner's vampires meets with Momose Naotora and threatens to cut ties with him because of how reckless they're being. Unfortunately, Momose doesn't care about their agreement, so he kills off the vampire and tells his team that they're going monster hunting. Meanwhile, Philip carries a stack of books for the umpteenth time just so Dorothea and Fallon can continue digging. Dorothea announces that the Hayako party haven't attacked any researchers since Dr. Hanada, and Fallon concludes that they've gathered all they're looking for. He sends a frustrated Philip to get some investigative reports, but Yuli offers to help. Immediately he leaves. Ryuko steps in to invite the team to dinner on her father's behalf. She stutters when Yuli returns to the room and everyone but Fallon reads into it. On the other hand, Professor pays the vice president of the Alma company a visit and they talk about their contracts with the military. As he's about to board the elevator down, Major Iba joins him and acts as though it's a coincidence. The ride down becomes a battle of wits as the Major fishes for information concerning the night of Dr. Hanada's death, and Professor acts a fool. They finally part ways, leaving Major Iba even more suspicious of V-shipping. Just then, General Kakizaki picks up the Major and expresses his surprise about seeing him in that part of town. As usual, Iba lies his ass off and congratulates the General on his promotion and fishes for information about his destination. General Kakizaki reveals that he's going to a secret military demonstration of a new weapon in Gotemba. He claims that soldiers may not be needed anymore and that he must ensure it's a success. With this, Major Iba excuses himself. Back at the Naoi residence, the Jaegers share information amongst themselves. Apparently, the police had raided the Hayako party that morning and found nothing but signs of a fight and some ash. Professor deduces that the party no longer had use for vampires after gathering the materials they needed. Dorothea thinks the Alma company is involved, and Professor brings up the military weapon they're demonstrating in Shizuoka. This gets everyone excited because they know that royal vampires will be present at the event, but Yuli offers to go. Meanwhile, Major Iba rushes to gather his things. instructing Mochizuki to get him a ticket to Gotemba just so he can go harass the armor company. That night, the Jaegers sit for dinner with the Baron and Ryuko. Philip struggles with chopsticks as Professor thanks Mr. Naoi for the courtesy. Ryuko, on the other hand, grows red in the cheeks when she discovers that Dorothea and Yuli will be heading out to Gotemba together. She then screams for them to return to their meal. General Kakizaki is freaked out after witnessing the Alma Company demonstration, and Kershner promptly tells him that he looks forward to a fruitful collaboration. Yevgraf, king of the vampire clan, appears before the old vampires and pitches his plan to grow their prosperity using the Ark of Sirius. Sadly, these old vampires want nothing to do with the wolves, and an insolent Yevgraf doesn't care. He promptly walks out on them. Twin vampires named Larissa and Tamara come running to him outside. They whisper some information into his ear and do a small celebration afterwards. Dorothea and Yuli board the train leading to Gotemba, and Ryuko manages to sneak in. Major Iba happens to be on the same train too. Ryuko peeks at them from her seat and realizes that she doesn't have the best plan. Meanwhile, Dorothea tries to get the werewolf to think less, but all he can think about is getting another chance to see his brother. The Hayako party step into the Alma Company building in disguise and board the elevator up. Immediately they get in, they change into their ceremonial outfits. They then draw swords and draw blood. Professor is busy educating Jiro on the differences between slave vampires and royal vampires. He soon discovers that the Hayako party have lost all their hideouts, and have also lost Alma Company as their sponsor. At the company, the Hayako party have killed every last worker on the floor except the vice president. Momose then tortures him until he gives up Kershner's location. On the train, they take a break so it can be set up to cross the mountain. During that time, Ryuko practices the different ways she can lie so Yuli won't think she's a stalker. Meanwhile, Major Iba gets a call from a frantic Mochizuki explaining how an entire battalion of infantrymen were killed in Gotemba. Apparently, Kakizaki is on his way back via a special train, and Major Iba spots him fast enough to run after it. Yuli, on the other hand, smells blood from the same train and launches towards it, leaving Dorothea no choice but to follow him. Like a rat to cheese, Ryuko chases after Yuli too. Back home, Professor, Philip and Fallon meet the Alma Company in flames and immediately decide to go in search of Yuli and Dorothea. A love-struck Ryuko soon discovers that she has no money to get a ticket and had forgotten her bag on the previous train. Major Iba makes his way to General Kakizaki, and Yuli informs Dorothea that a vampire is on the train with them. She then offers to scope it out while he waits. In one of the cars laid Kershner and Klarwein, his crazy scientist. He approves of the demonstration, and the scientist somersaults with joy. They had brought the specimen weapon on the train, and Kershner isn't so happy about Lord Yevgraf depending on the Ark of Sirius. While Dorothea is away, Mikael pays his brother a visit. Mikael takes the seat opposite Yuli, and the werewolf touches his face to confirm that it's his brother. They talk about why he ran off the other day, and Mikael admits that he's now a vampire. Things pick up when he also admits that he was the one who shot him down the other night, leaving Yuli to wonder why he saved him. Unfortunately, fate has left both brothers with no choice but to eventually kill each other, and Mikael makes it a point to remove vengeance from the heart of his brother. Dorothea runs into Ryuko, who had been scolded by the trainmaster for not having a ticket, and she pretends like she just wants to have a meal with her. As for Yuli, his brother pulls in closer and threatens him with death if he doesn't take his life at that moment. The werewolf is too emotional to take this chance, so Mikael simply walks away. Major Iba met Kakizaki looking as distraught as a penniless beggar. The man had thought Iba came by to hand him a death sentence, but gets told that he's spewing nonsense instead. The Major brings up the death of the infantryman and soon discovers that it was a bloody, one-sided battle. He squeezes his cane as he admits that the military was stupid to trust the Alma Company, and begs Major Iba not to let the monstrosity make its way to the capital. The Major is perplexed to discover that it's on the train. A mere meters away, Momose and some of his men approach the train via a small car. Insanity is evident on their faces as they catch a glimpse of their prey. Dorothea teases a naive Ryuko about her crush on Yuli, but the Naoi princess denies it. That's until she asks about the kind of work the Jaegers do. As a deflection, Dorothea tells her to go ask Yuli herself. The train suddenly comes to a halt courtesy of the Hayako party. Momose makes a public statement and instantly begins killing people with arrows. Meanwhile, Kakizaki instructs Major Iba to lead people to safety after he gets the news. Ryuko, on the other hand, is shocked when Dorothea pulls out a gun and urges her to go with the other civilians trying to escape. Right outside, some soldiers try shooting at Momose and his crew, but the leader is crazy enough to run into the gunfire and slay 2 soldiers at once. When backup comes, Momose quickly takes his team as they dodge. Kershner and Mikael have a conversation drenched in contempt as he calls him out for cutting off the Hayako party's funding. After Kershner discovers that Jaegers are also on the train, he instructs Mikael to use his claws and fangs for once. The vampire then disappears outside while the Hayako party raid the train cars in search of him. Instead, they run into the humanoid weapon Klarwein had created, and Momose mocks it as it mirrors mirrors his actions. They then reset the train tracks and ready themselves for takeoff. A very foolish Ryuko decided to stay on the train while other passengers jumped off. While Major Iba and the others get into a shootout, bullets almost bore holes into Dorothea. Yuli does like a superhero and helps a little girl off the train. He's left thinking about his brother's threat to treat him like an enemy should they meet again. He then jumps onto the back of the train. Inside, the soldiers mistakenly blow up some gas cylinders in an attempt to kill off the Hayako party members. Smoke from the explosion is a big enough sign to make Professor instruct Fallon to follow it. The monstrosity seemed to have protected Momo's from the blast, so he bursts out laughing and screams that the shower restoration is upon them. He then commands it to wreak havoc, but Klarwein sets the beast against them instead. Its first victim is Momo's, who he beheads in an unsightly manner. Fallon brings the car close to the bustling train, only to have a tire blown by a sudden explosion. Professor quickly deduces that the train tracks end up ahead and sends Philip and Fallon to retrieve Dorothea and Yuli. They arrive in time to hand Dorothea a fresh weapon, and Fallon disconnects the car behind them. Ryuko is lucky enough to make it to the other side of the train in the nick of time. Even Yuli jumps from train top to train top, and Fallon yells for him to stop the train before they run out of rails. Yuli keeps running until he arrives at the car with Klarwein's monstrosity. Major Iba and his men then retreat, but end up coming face to face with a vampire too. Luckily, Dorothea shoots the beast and informs her team about Iba's front as a journalist. They're too engrossed to notice that the vampire didn't die, but Ryuko quickly pulls out a soldier's sword and cuts down the beast with shaking hands. Dorothea tells her not to be worried, and the universe backs her up by turning the vampire to ash. Major Iba is the most surprised of them all, and he continues staring at the ashes long after the Jaegers leave the car. Back to Yuli, the monstrosity that he's fighting against loses its tether to the mad scientist, and Klarwein screams that this is the end. Mikael then shows up mid-battle, disappointed that Yuli still came after he warned him. He attacks the monster with a cynical smile on his face, slashing at its abdomen and then its hand. He cuts off said arm and leads the beast to the top of the train. Of course, it mindlessly follows. They face off and run towards each other, only for Mikael to literally feed it 2 grenades. The beast runs in the opposite direction and explodes right on top of one of the cars, causing a big enough impact to stop the train. Afterwards, Mikael asks Yuli to kill him if he ever loses control, and tells him that it's possible to give or take life if he finds the Ark of Sirius. Yevgraf is someplace else, approaching a huge airship and quipping that they've spent 10 years waiting for a future that is now before them. News spreads about Momos's death, and the masses wonder what will become of the Hayako party. Meanwhile, Klarwein is mad at Mikael for killing his creation, and an indifferent Kershner undermines it as he announces that Yevgraf doesn't think the Ark of Sirius is in the city. Klarwein runs off, refusing to give up, and Kershner reminds Mikael that they must exterminate the Jaegers before heading to Yevgraf's side. Yuli sits quietly by the Naoi garden while Philip and Fallon struggle to repair the automobile they ruined. The violinist got some grease smeared on his face and, after getting laughed at, announces that Yuli looks nothing like his brother. Professor draws closer to the werewolf, and they get talking about Mikael becoming a vampire, how he threatened Yuli, and what he said about the Ark of Sirius. He then poses Yuli with a chance to leave the Jaegers so he won't have to face off his brother. He has no idea what to do with his life other than vengeance, so Professor suggests that the Ark may be the key to giving him a chance to live with Mikael. First off, he wants Yuli to focus on the plan of the vampires after the destruction of their humanoid weapon. Inside, Ryuko receives the scolding of a lifetime from her father. He's so mad that he bans her from ever touching a sword and banishes her to a life of studying. She's adamant and refuses him, even when he brings up her mother. She then takes off after declaring that she won't stop training. Mochizuki arrives at work late and meets Major Iba looking through a newspaper. Apparently, General Kakizaki had written a report on the massacred infantrymen and killed himself afterwards. Mochizuki brings up the Alma Company's management going missing, but Major Iba is too freaked out by the memory of a disintegrating vampire to do anything about it. He puts his team on the search party for the Alma Company management and gives a vague reason for heading out. Around the same time, Yuli undresses and heads into the bathroom where he meets a nude Philip, keeping score of how long he can hold his breath. He then washes up while the violinist takes a soak, and they discuss Mikael being a vampire. In the dojo, Ryuko is busy defying her father. Dorothea walks in on her and commends her sword skills. The Naoi princess asks what Dorothea's reason was for joining V-shipping, but gets mocked for having a crush on Yuli. Both ladies later bond over their need to get rid of vampires, and Dorothea asks Ryuko to teach her the way of the sword. While Professor agrees to meet Jiro at the bar, Jiro waits for his CI at the park. He has no idea that his CI for the day is actually Major Iba and gets cornered into feeding him information on vampires. That night, Fallon dusts his palms and beams with joy over finishing the repairs on the automobile. Meanwhile, Jiro hurries back to his bar, angry that the army is now involved, too angry to notice the vampires tailing him. Upon getting back, he tries to call the Naoi household, but not before the vampires attack. Professor later arrives and is immediately suspicious of the scene. He cradles beside Jiro's half-dead body as the spy hands him a piece of paper. He then warns Professor about the vampires lurking around. That's all he needs to shoot the first one multiple times in the chest and corner the other, just to empty all of his bullets into him. The boys are playing cards as they wait on the Professor. Just then, he calls the house and breaks the news to Dorothea about an incoming vampire attack. She, in turn, announces it to the boys, and they plan to set traps, starting with the entrance. They also have to get everyone to safety, so Dorothea makes Yuli talk to Ryuko about that. He plainly tells her to convince her father to get everyone to the annex. She almost thought he wanted to include her until Yuli let slip that Dorothea put him up to it. Ryuko pretends like it doesn't matter and asks if she's to hide too. Yuli just quips that he heard about her strength and would like her to protect her father and the others. Fallon heads outside to set the traps while Ryuko dresses in full gear and threatens her father with monsters. The man thinks his daughter has lost her mind. That's until the lights suddenly go off and she screams in his face. While the vampires are fast approaching, Professor searches for the address Jiro had written down. Yuli asks an eager Philip if he feels like killing him because one of his kin killed his parents. The violinist just chucks it up to bad luck that the killer was a Sirius. Yuli seeks to find an answer in Philip's need for vengeance, but it ends in futility. Sounds of vampires falling into traps echo down the halls until some of them burst through the windows. After taking the first two down, the others hesitate. Yuli can smell them and alerts Philip just before they pour in from above. It soon becomes an all-out war as all the Jaegers struggle to kill the swarm of vampires from their various strongholds. They set the Naoi mansion on fire, and Kershner declares the beginning as he peels out his sword. Meanwhile, Ryuko tries to defend her father and the others, telling him that she'll buy some time if danger comes. Mr. Naoi disagrees because no father would want his daughter to protect him. Fallon and Dorothea continue shooting down as many vampires as they can, while Philip and Yuli make a run down the stairs. They run into Kershner, but as Philip is about to shoot him, Mikael bursts in through the window and kicks the violinist in the face. As he lifts him by the neck, Kershner faces off with Yuli. The werewolf manages to escape and saves a strangling Philip from his brother. The violinist tells him to leave, but Yuli is hell-bent on bringing him along. Kershner's attack gets interrupted by the ground-shaking effect of an armored truck bursting into the Naoi residence. Soon after, more trucks follow it, accompanied by multiple soldiers led by Major Iba and the Professor. They open fire on every vampire in sight, causing the ones already inside the building to rush outside. This gives Fallon and Dorothea some breathing space. Kershner flies off, leaving the siblings to fight to the death. Meanwhile, Baron Naoi almost goes outside to give the army a piece of his mind. All of that changes when he witnesses a vampire disintegrate. As for Major Iba, he's hell-bent on getting vengeance on whoever set loose the humanoid monster on the infantrymen. The siblings continue clashing weapons until Mikael's knives come mere inches from Yuli's eyes. The werewolf still promises not to kill him, even if he's a vampire. Mikael talks down on him for being a bad avenger, and Yuli pours his heart out. Unfortunately, his brother thinks the vampires will reach the Ark of Sirius before Yuli can kill all of them. Apparently, their father had already run off with the Ark before the vampires attacked Dogville in the past. Mikael then tells him to live and disappears into the shadows. On the rooftop, Professor comes face to face with Kershner and easily gets his gun knocked out of his hand. Yuli meets the Professor with Kershner's sword to his neck, and the vampire acknowledges that Mikael chose sides. He laughs out loud when he discovers Yuli's ignorance about Professor's involvement in the night at Dogville. They had come across an ancient book that stated Dogville as home to the Ark. Kershner taunts Yuli with this, and his eyes take on a blue glow. He attacks the vampire, but Kershner is nimble on his feet, telling the Sirius that there's more to the story. It turns out that the vampires couldn't make sense of the book without the help of an interested scholar, and that scholar was Professor Willard. These words shake Yuli to his core. He begins to shake in disbelief, and when the professor confirms it, he loses his mind. The blue of his eyes spread into his veins, and his teeth grow into fangs. An amused Kershner battles this new transformation, easily slashing his back and even unhanding him of his spear. Yuli doesn't stop. Kershner keeps the upper hand by stabbing him in his chest. But the werewolf pushes through the pain until he breaks the sword. He takes out the piece in his chest and stabs Kershner so deeply that his hand bursts out of his back. The vampire curses and coughs up blood before turning to a heap of dust. Professor then opens his arms and tells Yuli to come for him. The werewolf jumps on him and almost pokes out his eyes. He stops halfway just to ask why the professor never told him anything. Things heat up as he blames his ego for saving Yuli back then. He looked at it as his atonement and then turned around to use the youngster as a tool for revenge. He had made peace with dying by his hand, but an emotionally confused Yuli credits the professor for helping him survive the last 10 years. He holds on to him, asking question after question about his fate as the remnant of the Sirius. The next day, Major Iba gets chewed out by his superiors, and Mochizuki meets him right outside. Iba tells him that their team has been disbanded for abuse of power, and then declares that he'll be heading back to Harbin. Ryuko's sensei screams as he arrives at the Naoi residence, or what's left of it. His student quickly eases his mind and informs him that her father is fine. The icing on the cake is that V-shipping will pay reparations for all the damage. Yuli and the professor stand away from the crowd discussing the Ark and how it contains wisdom and technologies unknown to mankind. Yuli's father had known how important it was, so he ran off with it. And now the werewolf remembers his brother's prompt to do only what the last surviving Sirius can do. Yuli interprets this to mean protecting the Ark and tells Professor that he wants to find it. In turn, the Professor informs him of Yevgraf and how the vampire is the closest to the Ark at the moment. On a twin airship somewhere, Yevgraf enjoys a cup of blood. He gets updated that a disease is spreading amongst vampires worldwide, and the twins interrupt with news of Kershner's death. He asks after Mikael and discovers that he and Klarwein will be joining them soon. Dorothea drops by to give Yuli his coat, but meets all three boys lazing around. Fallon ends up asking about the Professor, and she tells him that he's contacting headquarters. True to her words, Professor is at Jiro's bar contacting HQ. He hears some sounds downstairs and meets Major Iba drinking in honor of Jiro. He makes mention of the Ark of Sirius, much to the Professor's surprise. Captain Akasaka Mamoru had been sent to find the Ark 15 years ago, but went missing in action. The Great War had distracted the government for some time, and now they're ready to continue the search. The mantle falls to Major Iba just because of his ties with the Professor, so he asks him if he recognizes Akasaka. The Professor denies it, but freely tells him that vampires are also after the Ark, and that they were seen in Sakhalin. He rounds up with a lie that he no longer has any interest in searching for the Ark, and both men share a drink. The Professor goes home and fills in the other Jaegers. Apparently, orders from HQ are for them to head to London, which happens to be Philip's home. Mikael awakes from a brief dream about the time Yevgraf had turned him, and Klarwein screams that he couldn't get any sleep because of how excited he is to meet their master. They finally join him at a mountaintop, but only Mikael is allowed deeper into the mountain, into where the Ark of Sirius lies. On the ship to Sakhalin, Yuli remembers the Professor's words about Yevgraf finding the Ark by using the ancient book. Apparently, there were clues about where his father took the Ark in it. Yuli snaps out of it as he anticipates meeting Yevgraf and the Ark in South Sakhalin. Meanwhile, Yevgraf talks to Mikael about missing all the chances to kill his precious little brother. As they go deeper into the cave, the vampire reveals that they're in a Sirius holy land, one where the Ark was birthed and where it was also sealed off. Mikael's father had brought it here, and Yevgraf promised to show him why his dad never returned to Dogville. They come upon a pool of water, and Yevgraf tells him that the Ark was sealed off to everyone eternally, using his father's life. He thinks Mikael will be the exception, being both a Sirius and his son. Yuli arrives at southern Sakhalin while Philip throws a tantrum about it back home. As dangerous as it sounded, the others try to rationalize his trip. Well, except Philip. They all turn to Professor, who tells them that they have to take a detour before heading to London. The werewolf stops by for a meal but feels an intruder coming close. He tries retrieving his weapon, but the intruder calls his full name and introduces himself as Bishop. It turns out he's a Jaeger too. Back in the cave, Yevgraf urges Mikael to retrieve the Ark, and he goes for it. Unfortunately, every step he takes burns him. He continues to struggle, but he falls on all fours and becomes pitiable in Yevgraf's eyes. The vampire controls his stubborn subordinate, forcing him to retrace his steps. Mikael fights this compulsion and comes mere inches from stabbing Yevgraf with both his knives. It's quite sad that Mikael's sense of duty can't compare to his blood pact with Yevgraf. The vampire makes his commander punch the lights out of Mikael and later wonders how Yuli will fare against the seal. The werewolf shouts when Bishop tells him that all his colleagues got wiped out. He had called for reinforcements, and Yuli has to remind him that he isn't it. Bishop deduces that he's there for the Ark and soon suggests that they work together. The only problem is he wants to destroy the Ark, but Yuli doesn't. He makes this clear before they shake on it. Yevgraf and Mikael silently exit the mountain, and Klarwein is waiting right outside. He hounds his master about how it went, and when he gets no answer, he desperately pitches his humanoid weapon as the solution. Yevgraf still keeps him quiet, so the scientist falls on his knees, promising to prove that his research is worthwhile. That night, Baron Naoi is soliloquizing when the sensei comes in with a note from Ryuko. She feels responsible for their home and has traveled to London to get to the bottom of it. Her father gives Sensei the impression that he'll let her be, and then suddenly asks that they pack their things and follow Ryuko. Unfortunately, both Major Iba and Ryuko are on a train to Sakhalin. Deep in the mountains, a recluse complains about the cold and is oblivious to the vampires lying in wait. Bishop and Yuli make their way up the mountains and have a heart-to-heart about losing teammates and family on the way. Their conversation is cut short when Bishop sees the flashes from a gun and steps on it like he's Paul Walker. The recluse struggles to fight off the vampires, but Bishop comes to his rescue. Yuli then jumps out of the car and rushes to his side. He hears giggles from the woods accompanied by Larissa and Tamara flying in. They're polite enough to introduce themselves and then throw multiple knives at Yuli and his acquaintance. They taunt him about Mikael and reveal that Yevgraf turned him into a vampire. They continue asking him infuriating questions until they suggest that he form a pact with them. The twins then attack him simultaneously, and the royals attack using knives and, strangely enough, bombs, the explosive kind and the smoke kind alike. Yuli gets a chance to kill Tamara, but he notices that her eyes look dead. Bishop rushes to his rescue, letting out bullets from his 6-shooter. The twins then retreat as they laugh and promise to bring Mikael next time. The recluse points a gun at Yuli after finding out who and what he is. He asks what the son of Alexei is looking for. Around the same time, the remaining Jaegers are on a train to Dogville, and Philip brutally complains that he doesn't want to camp out for the night. While he and Fallon are messing around, Dorothea joins the professor inside the car. She meets him going through his copy of the ancient text and wonders aloud if Yuli would have come if he knew where they were headed. The professor disproves this, and Dorothea makes him understand that he's not to blame for Yuli's unhappiness. Yuli tries talking to the recluse after Bishop reminds him that they saved his life. All he says is that he chased the Ark of Sirius, and it led him to follow Alexei to Dogville. Sadly, Alexei abandoned him there. He was able to track him down to Sakhalin, and this gives Yuli hope that Alexei is still alive. The recluse shuts down this hope as he informs the werewolf that his father made sure the Ark wouldn't get into anyone's hands. He then kicks them out, refusing to say any more. Yuli wants to press him harder, but a grab from Bishop calms him down. Both Jaegers head back to their automobile, where Bishop analyzes the situation. He thinks it was all a ruse to get to Yuli and suggests that they hurry things up, starting with getting the recluse to talk. On the airship, the twins are reiterating last night's events to Yevgraf. Mikael just happens to join them at that moment and speaks rudely to his master. That aside, the mention of Yuli's name draws Mikael's attention, and Yevgraf plans to join the twins on their next mission to see the werewolf. To hit the spot, he promises that it'll be at the Holy Land of Sirius and that Yuli will do the work that his brother couldn't. Yuli and Bishop decide to go for a bite, but they run into Ryuko and Major Iba outside the restaurant. It's the weirdest link-up, and a fast-talking Ryuko reiterates how she saw her dad at the port, freaked out, and joined Major Ibu on his journey. She's just happy that she got to see her crush again. It turns out that the recluse is actually Captain Akasaka Mamoru, and Major Iba is very much interested in him. Ryuko gets lost as the men talk about the Ark and Alexei, but Yuli keeps staring at Major Iba with such contempt. The Major has plans for the Ark, but this doesn't concern a Yuli, who declares that the Ark belongs to the Sirius. Later on, Ryuko joins Yuli on the rooftop to ask how he's faring. The werewolf is vague as usual, and she tells him that she hopes he meets his dad. Yuli asks her what a dad is, stunning her into a temporary silence. She then describes her father as naggy and misunderstanding, but adds that he takes pride in protecting the ones he loves. Yuli applies the definition to his father, and better still, to Mikael. Meanwhile, said brother tries to sneak out to warn Yuli that night. He gets caught immediately, and the twins, alongside Yevgraf, surround him. Before he can attack, a bunch of vampires have him at gunpoint. That's until one of them falls victim to the plague, killing their kind. It's Tamara's slave, so she hands him a dagger and tries controlling him to kill himself. It doesn't work. The beast launches towards Yevgraf, but his commander protects him, banishing the vampire to a myriad of gunshots. Yevgraf then warns Mikael to stay put if he doesn't want to end up like the dead vampire. Everyone from Yuli down to Ryuko pays Akasaka a visit this time. Major Iba does the talking, seeing as he's the successor. Both men bond over their sense of duty, and the Major asks for the location of the Ark. Yuli rushes to Akasaka's side and puts pressure on the request. Sadly, the man doesn't speak up because of a promise he made to Alexei. He informs him about the vampire raid at Dogville 10 years ago, and this breaks Akasaka's spirit. Yuli presses on, talking about being the last of the Sirius and needing to know about the Ark by all means. The former captain then sees Alexei and Yuli and bursts into tears. He finally reveals the location of the Ark and reiterates how he heard Alexei's voice when he touched it. Yuli thanks him for sticking by his father's side all these years, and Akasaka hands him a map with an outline leading to the mountain. He also hands him a picture he took with Alexei and leaves the werewolf with a mandate to complete the mission. Meanwhile, Professor and the others finally arrive at the ruins of Dogville, and Dorothea quips that they should split into 2 groups as they lay the corpses of the departed to rest. The next morning, Ryuko comes knocking frantically at Major Iba's door and laments about Yuli and Bishop running off on their own. The Major tells her that they'll follow them thanks to his perfect memory of the map. Bishop, on the other hand, doesn't think he's enough backup for the mission. Yuli encourages him though. He gets asked why he didn't kill Tamara, and the werewolf said he didn't like her eyes. He's then made to promise that he won't hesitate next time. Professor and his team stand in the remnants of the home for the royalty of Sirius. They head into the tomb beneath it as Professor deciphers a strange door to be the only place where it can be sealed. He reveals that the real home grounds are in Sakhalin and that the Sirius had made an artifact to pair with the Ark. Professor then approaches a structure in the center of the shrine and reads the foreign language written on it. Afterwards, he retrieves an eye-like vessel embedded into the structure and declares that Yuli will need it if the seal in Sakhalin is ever undone. They then rush off on a jet. This doesn't stop the werewolf. Instead, his hair turns white, his eyes glow blue, and his teeth become fangs. Small flood and then disappears into it. He doesn't drown, rather small bubbles of memories widen and then a memory of Akasaka shooting down a bear to save him and Mikael. Akasaka got welcomed into the clan because of this. And after some time, he opened up to Alexei about his secret mission, warning him that more world powers will come after the Ark. Yuli sees a conversation where Gustav tells Alexei that Akasaka must die because tradition requires it of any outsider with knowledge of the Ark or an intent to covet it. Alexei wasn't having any part in this. He defended Akasaka and even brought up the fact that Gustav sanctioned his marriage to Sachi, who was also an outsider. Alexei wanted a new pride for the Sirius people, so he beseeched Gustav to teach him how to seal away the Ark. He reluctantly agreed and told Alexei to head to Sakhalin, the original holy place. He also warned him about the danger that sealing the Ark could pose, all while Yuli's consciousness watches from a distance. He witnesses his father's goodbye to Sachi and Mikael, and Yuli doesn't agree with him. The werewolf grabs Alexei by his shirt and preaches the same gospel of a new pride that the Sirius will carry. The same gospel that Alexei sacrificed himself for. But this time, Yuli wants to find a way to do it without sealing the Ark. After telling his father how Mikael and their mother passed his will onto him, Yuli gets his father's approval. The whole place dims as Alexei peels out the Ark. He hands it to Yuli in the hopes. Unfortunately, this also signals Yevgraf and his people. All of the water disappears, revealing a cross-legged Yuli as he wields the Ark within his palms. Right outside, Ryuko and Major Iba witness the light emanating from the mountain. They also see Yevgraf's airship hovering around the area. In it, the vampire throws Mikael to the ground and compels him till his will diminishes. He then commands Mikael's husk to kill Yuli and retrieve the blood-stained Ark of Sirius. Bishop, Yuli, Ryuko, and Major Iba all meet inside the holy mountain, and the werewolf shows them the Ark. The Major had brought a telegraph along, and Ryuko warns them about Yevgraf's airship. Yuli doesn't back down. He'd rather settle the score as the last surviving Sirius. Unfortunately, Bishop threatens to kill Ryuko if Yuli doesn't leave the Ark behind. As Professor urges Fallon to fly them directly to the mountain range, the rest of them are busy cleaning and preparing their weapons for the incoming battle. Prof looks at the vessel in his hand and hopes that Yuli doesn't do something too reckless. Meanwhile, Bishop still has his gun pointed at Ryuko. Major Iba then calls him out as British intelligence. Bishop doesn't deny it. In fact, he admits to using Yuli the whole time. Yuli announces that he knew. He even tells Bishop to drop the act, and he lets his vampire sideshow after this. He asks him why he still worked with him, and Yuli says he saw the regret in his eyes. Bishop had mentioned that he wanted to find the Ark just so he could break it before Yevgraf's eyes, and Yuli couldn't detect any deceit while he was saying it. This breaks Bishop's resolve, and he releases Ryuko. He laments about seeing the faces of his teammates that died. He had made peace with the fact that all vampires would die because of the fatal disease, but the Ark could change that. This makes him yell at Yuli for wanting to go off on his own when everyone present has a stake in defeating vampires. The werewolf humbles himself and accepts help from Bishop, much to Major Iba's surprise. They all head out together, but Larissa and Tamara are already waiting for them. Yuli, being ahead, signals for the rest of them to hold on. Just then, the twins present a mindless Mikael who wastes no time attacking his brother, and they join the fight just because. After they tell Yuli that his brother is completely under Yevgraf's control, he makes a run for it. The twins enjoy chasing him and ploughing his path with explosives, but Mikael simply flies and corners Yuli. He breaks apart his spear, stabs his left shoulder, and asks him for the Ark yet again. Yuli tries appealing to their bond as brothers, but Mikael twists the knife some more. He then feels up Yuli's jacket and rips the Ark out of it. Mikael stains it with Yuli's blood and throws it to the twins, who take off immediately. Bishop is quick enough to catch Larissa's foot, though. He then feeds her a bullet and watches as she turns to dust. He yells for Yuli to leave the Ark to him and flies off in pursuit of Tamara. The werewolf tries talking to his brother after he catches a second knife meant to kill him. He mentions seeing their father, but it has no effect. Yuli then dodges the knife and pushes Mikael away. The vampire floats in the air while Yuli takes out the dagger from his shoulder. They continue clashing daggers as Yuli wonders if he'll have to put down his brother. Just then, Mikael glitches and grabs hold of his heart. This messes up Yuli's balance and he almost falls off a cliff. Weirdly, he's saved by Mikael, who presses him against the wall and lashes out at him for coming to the mountain anyway. Yuli tries explaining his mission, but it doesn't matter to his brother. Ryuko and Major Iba step outside and meet Tamara and Bishop still going at it. Yuli continues yelling about what his dad had planned for the Ark, how he wanted to create a new pride for the Sirius, one where people of all races would share in its power. Mikael pushes him to the floor and bursts into tears soon enough. He had promised to protect Yuli and wanted to fulfill said promise. Yuli also gets emotional and both brothers say they love each other. Just then, Mikael coughs up an unhealthy amount of blood. Outside, Bishop finally shoots the Ark out of Tamara's hand, grabs hold of it, and catches the vampire at gunpoint. Bishop lingers for too long, so Yevgraf turns up and threatens him not to lose the Ark. Yuli staggers as he helps his sick brother out of the cave. The sound of a gun going off makes them speed up their steps. Unfortunately, they meet that Yevgraf already has one hand sticking out of Bishop and has the Ark in his other hand. A dying Bishop apologizes for failing Yuli. But as he's about to slander Yevgraf, the vampire finishes him off. He then faces Mikael and expresses his disappointment over him poisoning himself with the disease. He brushes that aside as he begins to rain praises on the Ark, lifting it, and thanking Yuli for bringing him such power. He promises to let the werewolf be a dog in his regime, and this infuriates him enough to make him launch towards the vampire. Yevgraf easily dodges him by floating away, and Mikael offers to chase him while Yuli handles the vampires on the ground. They argue about it until Major Eba helps them prioritize. The vampires draw closer and never see Fallon's airstrike coming. Bullets rain down on the vampires, loudly announcing the arrival of the Jaegers. The commander of the vampires throws a mighty weapon that bursts through the front of the jet and almost hits Fallon. This makes him lower the jet enough for the commander to grab hold of it. After the dust settles, Yuli notices Mikael had gone after Yevgraf, so he follows suit. Ryuko then hands him her sword and he thanks her for it. Fallon flies the jet close enough to Yevgraf's airship for Professor to board it. Meanwhile, Yevgraf swallows the Ark of Sirius and laughs maniacally as its power courses through his veins. Fallon's jet had taken too much damage, so it crashes soon enough. Dorothea doesn't even let the dust settle before putting a bullet in the commander's head. Mikael finally comes face to face with Yevgraf, but the vampire had already become one with the Ark. Meanwhile, Professor notices Yuli chasing after the airship, so he hijacks the control room and lowers it for him to jump aboard. Professor then gets slashed in the stomach by a surviving vampire. On the ground, Ryuko and Major Eba check on the remaining Jaegers, and Dorothea mocks her for following them because she loves Yuli. Yevgraf can't shut up about his new powers, and Tamara thinks he'll cure the disease that's spreading. Sadly, he now thinks it's beneath him. Mikael tries attacking him, but he uses his overwhelming strength to whip him to oblivion. Yevgraf thinks of himself as a new breed of vampire, so he bites his fellow vampire in a bid to make him strong. Instead, he disintegrates. He now thinks it's because the vampire wasn't a royal, so he compels Tamara so he can test her. Luckily, Yuli arrives just in time to save her, and Yevgraf breaks into yet another speech about his newfound power. He mentions destroying the old race of vampires and starting a new breed through himself, but his speech gets cut off when the Ark begins to overwhelm his body. He screams as he transforms into quite the ugly winged creature and flies off in pursuit of Mikael. Professor staggers into the room and Yuli hurries to tie up his wound. He tells him of his plan to unite all races, so Professor hands him the counterpart of the Ark, the one they found in Dogville. The Professor thinks it'll balance the power of the Ark and encourages Yuli to follow his path. Yuli rushes to his brother's aid, but each body part he cuts off of Yevgraf just grows back. Meanwhile, Tamara is in her feelings after hearing Yuli talk about a world of coexistence. The Professor then informs her that such a place is possible with the Ark. The brothers take the fight to the top of the airship as they tag Team Yevgraf. Mikael becomes too sick to fight, so Yuli hacks off the vampire's leg. This time, it doesn't grow back. Yevgraf tries to fly away after noticing this, but Yuli jumps after him, holding onto the sword he had stabbed him with. The vampire slaps him off his person, but he's lucky enough to get caught by Mikael. They catch up to the beast and Yuli twists the sword deeper into his abdomen. Mikael then takes a hit as he digs his arm into Yevgraf's eye and pulls out the Ark of Sirius. This doesn't shut him up, so Mikael cuts Yevgraf's head clean off, leaving the rest of him to turn into dust and scatter in the wind. They land gently on the airship, and Mikael hands his brother the Ark, telling him to live by all means. They share an emotional moment before he breathes his last breath, leaving Yuli to burst into tears. He grips his brother's corpse as tears fall down his cheeks. He then embodies the power of the Ark and appears to Professor on the coast of a blue sea. Yuli grabs his hand and confesses that he'll use the power to help the whole world, just like the entity that gave it had planned. He then begs the Professor to kill him should the power take over his senses. As he leaves, he calls him Dad for the first time. Professor wakes up 4 days later, surrounded by everyone from Dorothea down to Ryuko. They're all excited to see him and fill him in on all he missed. Ryuko asks about Yuli and Professor quips that he has gone off bearing enough power to either make him a devil or a god. Time passes and Major Eba links up with Ryuko. She tells him that she's now taking business classes so she can take over her father's business. They catch up on other things, and then part ways. Unfortunately, Ryuko will have eyes on her for the foreseeable future just because the Japanese government is searching for the Ark. The Major spills the tea to Mochizuki about what the Ark is and admits that humans aren't worthy of wielding such power. He then promises to do only what he can moving forward, all in hopes that it'll align with what Yuli is trying to do. Ryuko crouches over a bed of flowers, and she also plans to work in a way that her plans and those of Yuli will one day overlap. Talking about the Sirius, he and Tamara cover their faces with hoods as they board a train out of Khabarovsk. The other Jaegers are seated in a closed bar, listening to Professor go on about why the Sirius were granted the power of the Ark. They lament about being made to search for the Ark rather than to hunt vampires, but they're interrupted when a message comes for Professor. Apparently, a royal vampire and a young boy were spotted in Khabarovsk, and the thought of it being Yuli excites them all, especially Professor. They immediately ready their things and head out. On the train, our reborn hero listens calmly as Tamara tells him that the vampire elders have given up on him visiting, but she hasn't. The royal promises to wait for him forever and then disappears into thin air. Yuli stares out the train window, thinking to himself that he'll come across different worlds that won't want to coexist. He's filled with a fresh resolve to never stop trying to fulfill his mission. This is because he's the Sirius, the one who must protect the world and bring it together. Thanks for watching, see you in the next video.